Guess we're on.
Hey everybody! So we have special guests on my show, Mercer, Shelley, and Thomas, and they're NTJs, and they want to present this theory about how they type people. I think this could be pretty fascinating, interesting how NTJ masterminds collaborate. And you could tell which is which because INTJs their stereotype is that they wear black or gray clothing not to stand out. So you know who they are. See, and one obviously is an ENTJ. He's got this SE out there. So there's a theory that your first and third function you kind of push out more. It doesn't matter regardless of strength. And the second, fourth function you're more conservative about or in expressing. So it's presented right here. So anyway, I want to hear about your theory. So go ahead.
Okay, so first we'll get into it. We represent Mongolian Mindset group. It's a self-improvement group. Over there, we talk about everything when it comes to finances, health, working out, anything pretty much to improve yourself, knowledge, reading books, anything like that. We have debates sometimes once a week. We have a monthly call where everybody gets on and talks about the goals they accomplished every month.
I'm there, by the way.
Yeah, Leon's there. So that keeps us all accountable, and we want to see like how that will affect our futures. But it's got a huge center to MBTI, and I know everybody's wondering like, why did you come up with Mongolian Mindset? Well, when I was younger, I was really into conquerors. I was into reading Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Genghis Khan, all those guys. And the one that stuck out to me,
It's all those guys, but focused on doing good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everybody's a prisoner of their time. But Genghis Khan stuck out to me the most, and I thought to myself that he was the most successful of them. So I love the mindset that he had, and I think that mindset is needed more than ever today to become successful and to get things done. I think people neglect that. So that's something that I want to push with the group. And I think that mindset will help you transcend and give something bigger than yourself in your lifetime.
Right.
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thomas and Shelley, you guys got anything to say before we get into the typing method?
I don't think so. I think you covered it pretty well, man. Yeah.
All right. So let's get on to this typing method. So how does it work?
Okay. So what we end up doing, we have a panel of 2 to 3 whenever we type someone, and we use Linda Berens interaction styles and temperament. It's in this right here. Okay. We've all pretty much went over it intensely between ourselves. And there is a couple metrics that you use, like abstract versus concrete. So abstract would be the what if, like a person talks about the what if, intangibles, philosophies, things of that nature. There would be more theories, stuff like that. There would be more of the abstract realm. Okay. And then you have the concrete, which is talking about the what is. That's like talking about like experiences and stuff like that, not really going into more of the abstract things. So
that's sensing versus intuition. That's what makes it depressing to be an intuitive type, because the world is about like what it could possibly and never what it is.
Essentially, abstract people tend to think what is possible, possible. So you can notice that when people talk and how they talk. So you can put someone in a category of abstract versus concrete, and that's one of the metrics. Thomas, you want to go into another metric?
Yeah, I guess I could talk about like informative versus direct. So, direct people like the three of us, me, Mercer, Shelley, we're very clear and concise with our language. We take a stand in the conversation, like we choose our role. And like with the informative person, it's kind of like the opposite, where like they don't really take a stand, they don't choose their role. They'll just kind of like provide you with information and kind of like let you make up your own mind. What else can I say about that? Informative people can very often they can come across as like very wordy, if not vague. They're the kind of people that are probably more likely to be accused of like beating around the bush, or being passive aggressive just because of their lack of directness. But when it comes to those 8 personality types, they kind of just can't help it. That the fact that they're informative. Informative people are informative.
Thomas, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh. Yeah,
it's definitely true. As informative
with
type.
with direct people, it's kind of like the negative is that they can be seen as like very bossy, like they're ordering you around, or like they're talking down to you. And then like an additional component that we like to talk about is like with there's all of this is like on a scale, or it's on a spectrum, like. And like for instance, women generally going to be more informative than men are. Men are going to generally be more direct. So there's going to be variation among the types, and then there's going to be variation like depending on like your status or your role like, within a group or within like society. Like Mercer might he might be very direct with most people in his life, but if he comes across somebody who's like higher status, like like he used the example like Obama, but you're not gonna be talking down to Obama. You're not gonna be very direct with like certain people out there. You're gonna probably be a little bit more informative in how you talk to them. So yeah, I thought hopefully that's like a good like quick capsule review of like what we mean when we're talking about direct versus informative.
Oh, interesting. So like the higher up direct type climbs in the ladder, then there's nobody to be informative around.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look at most people in charge, most like people like that, I think they very often they are one of the direct types. You can, there are some exceptions where you'll find like maybe like an INTP who's in a position of authority. But yeah, very often those people are direct as it is. But then if you're working for some kind of organization where you like depend on it for your livelihood, you're not gonna like you have to tread carefully because I don't know how much you've read Robert Greene, but Mercer likes to bring up Robert Greene and like Robert Greene he talks about you don't want to outshine the master, and like the thing is that you think that people attain a position of authority, like maybe their ego like lessens, but actually it gets worse. Like so people feel like their egos get slighted very easily, and I've kind of unfortunately I think I kind of find that out in my own life at times where. Because I could be very direct and I have the FE trickster going on. And I just kind of like screw the social rules. I'm not paying attention to that. So I think at times I could come across as like brash or disrespectful when it's not my intention. And then like right. If I'm doing that to like a higher up, it's like they kind of like a how dare you kind of attitude.
I imagine from a higher perspective, there's still like a important social role for that, for people who kind of like call out or kind of they could be whistleblowers for instance. I'd say.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because you're talking about like a mixture of it's typology, but it's also involving society and how it runs. So the presentation of the different types, like of individuals, the different types may be different.
Yeah, I don't want to go on too long, but I'll just like one more thing I'll say is like sometimes within like informative people. It's like they are like so informative. It's like you could hardly understand like what they're saying because it's like they're just like they're just providing you like additional details and context and like
that's our secret power grab.
Yeah, it kind of is. But then you have some informative people who almost come across like they're direct, and then those people like because again we're talking about our typing methods here. Those people can be somewhat more difficult, I think, at times. Like I've noticed sometimes with SFPs. They can come across like kind of direct, where you don't know if is this an SFP or is this an NTJ. So sometimes we have that trouble. And then there's also like maybe we'll talk about this later, but a component with being a direct responding movement type or a finisher type. So because they are progression focused, and despite the fact that they're direct, because they're progression focused, they can kind of come across as more informative compared to like Mercer, who's direct, initiating an outcome. So Mercer, he's not gonna like go from A to Z like like I would or like Shelley would. He's just gonna go to the outcome like very quickly, and not like go on forever like I've just been doing.
I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious about something. So you mentioned about. I'm trying to remember what I was curious about. First of all, right now, but it was like something about earlier that you've mentioned about. So what makes SP. So you're talking about SPs that appear
Okay.
direct, but they're informative. So what makes them actually informative?
So informative is just essentially like you are giving people information, but you're not really standing on anything, telling people what to do. You're not in a directive type of, like you're not trying to direct people. You're just like giving them information and then hoping they come up with the conclusion. So like one of the things would be I have a ESFP cousin, right? I'll buy a whole bunch of wings, whatever, and sometimes I ain't in a sharing mood, and then he'd be like, man, I would love a wing, He's informing me that he wants a wing, He's informing me that he wants a wing instead of just saying, hey, can I have a wing? He's like, man, your wings look good. Like, just ask me, So it's kind of like he's like leaving it up into the in the open for me to kind of grab it in my head and then be like, hey man, you want a wing? Instead of like, hey man, can I have a wing? Or can I get that wing? Or something like that. Like kind of like throwing it out there.
It's like a different strategy for influence, right? It's helpful to be direct, but it's also helpful to be indirect as well.
Mm-hmm. I think more than ever today, being direct has its purposes. I would say this is just my opinion, but I think being informative, you can get a lot more out of things because no one likes to be told what to do. And when you're direct, you say something and there's no way to get out of it. There's absolutely no way to get out of what you just said. But when you're informative, you can backtrack like you ain't never seen. Like you can get out of it, you backtrack, you can say that's not what I meant. But when you're direct, it's right there.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, Shelly, I would like to hear your input on this.
Oh, for informative versus direct. Well, I think in informative types also, when they're talking, they tend to add unnecessary details. Like say if they're telling a story about somebody, like they'll go and be like, oh, and she was married to this person and and they lived down in Texas for 20 years, like just information you didn't actually need, where a direct person is going to stay a lot more on topic.
Right. For a direct person, I imagine like for INTPs, all this footnotes and qualifications are important.
Yeah, but I think the listener can tend to get lost, especially.
It could be pretty excessive for sure.
So Shelly, you want to give us?
I felt like what you described. So like I was meeting with Joyce and Paul. So Joyce has her own channel about the MBTI, and we're talking about INFPs. And then I felt like I just like derailed the whole entire conversation. Like it's ironic because she wanted to talk about expert thinking in INFPs, and then we end up not like talking about it because I was like rambling on a lot of different things.
Wow.
Yeah, I have INTPs in my life that get the subject right, the conversation off track quite often.
Okay, Shelly, you want to give us affiliative versus pragmatic?
Yeah. So affiliative versus pragmatic. I guess affiliative people tend to be more concerned with the group and making sure that everybody feels good and not wanting to step on anybody's toes. They tend to ask people for permission before doing something, versus a pragmatic person who will just go ahead and do it and then apologize later.
So who is affiliative and pragmatic in the system, in the MBTI system? Is it thinking, feeling, or is it not that straightforward?
It goes by temperament.
Okay, so who's
ISTJs, ESTJs, ISFJs, ESFJs are all affiliative, and then the NFPs and the NFJs are affiliative also.
Okay. All right.
So like, for instance, ENTJ would be pragmatic. That means they're going to break rules. They're gonna, be kind of rebellious. Going to be seen more like a contrarian. While it's like an ESTJ would be more of an affiliative route. They're not going to really cause as much problems, or they're not going to be as rebellious. They're going to look for the group, like inclusion. They're trying to interdependent is more of the thing that they're going for. As an ENTJ, don't give a damn about the group sometimes. They can be like, damn,
So, where is ENTP in the system? Like people who are just trolling around.
ENTPs will be pragmatic.
They'll be what? Oh, pragmatic.
Pragmatic goes onto NTs.
Okay.
Are all pragmatic. All NTs are pragmatic. So they can be rebellious, contrarians. They don't like when roles are assigned to them because they like more freedom aspects to things. As in, like a filler person is okay with you saying, okay, you do this job and I'll do this job. Like pragmatic person is kind of like, don't give me a job, you know. Kind of gets in the way with them being able to be effective. Being pragmatic is more about being effective. It's a utilitarian mindset more.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
NTs and SPs have a utilitarian mindset, while as an affiliative mindset is more about cooperation.
Interesting.
Go to that aspect. So, like somebody like yourself, it's about cooperation.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I think there's also like all these cultural differences. One cultural difference is in work. For instance, in my opinion, because I work in the psychotherapy field, there's actually a lot of INTJs in that field. There's a lot of them, but they kind of act affiliative. Like they kind of found some sort of like middle way. It's the nature of the work.
Well, I mean, you can find a way to be affiliative or whatnot, but the mask kind of wears off as they talk. It'll slowly but surely kind of wear off. Like Thomas can put up a front.
I'm gonna look at Shelley and Thomas very closely and see the mask like melting off their face.
Like when you can slowly but surely you'll see it, and then like the more they'll talk about needing freedom. You know, they'll talk about like kind of not being good with authority. They'll talk about things like that, and then you can be able to figure out like this person is more in the pragmatic realm than affiliative. So you'll see that with the people a lot.
I'm kind of curious, like if you all have, because secretly everyone has the opposite tendency. So do you feel like you dream about being the opposite to a certain degree? Like for me, like I have like in my dream world, the nighttime version of Leon, I'm more direct, but that's like it's more aspirational. If that makes sense. So I was wondering, like, if you feel like I want to be more like affiliative.
I don't think about being affiliative because to me things just do not get done. And majority of the time or positions that I try to put myself in are in leadership roles. So, and that's what drives me as a person. So I would never want to be more affiliative. I think I incorporate being more affiliative to accommodate the group, because if you're the leader, that just gives you the best outcome. But outside of that, if something needs to be done, I got a hand in just going ahead and getting it done without asking, is it okay? You know,
I don't think I would have any aspiration to be affiliative either. I mean, I wouldn't want to have to like have this mindset where like, I want to lean on other people, like doing things by myself and independent and yeah.
Thomas?
Yeah, I mean I think that's an interesting question. I think in some sense, like if you're asking me, do what I want to be more affiliative, like I mean, there's yes and no. I think what I would like is I think it would be helpful for like society and everybody if people were more cooperative towards like some sort of like higher end goal, like something that's for like the better of society. And when I was like younger and more naive, I could like believe that we would actually do something like that. But I guess I'm kind of jaded at this point, and I don't think it's really realistic. That people are just too. I don't want to go on a rant, but people are just they care about their own issues, their own interests. They're not really gonna try to work for like some higher goal, like at least not the way that I envision it. So, but I think I see pros and cons to both, and you need a balance. You can't have too many pragmatic people, or society will just burn to the ground. In my day-to-day life, affiliative people kind of drive me nuts though. like, trying to control, like, especially when it comes to like people trying to impose social norms on me, because like with my FE trickster, like, I don't understand it very well, and then people want to like try to like dictate how I'm supposed to behave. It's like, and I'm just like, leave me alone. Like, I'm not bothering anybody. Just leave me alone. Like, but just hopefully that wasn't too wishy-washy.
That makes a lot of sense. That society would be better off if there's a balance between the impersonal and personal. Like everything ultimately is about balance, and everyone for some reason is created off balance. But it's really like people who are interesting and they seem very developed. They're people who kind of they balance the both worlds in some sort of way. Yeah. Well, working as a psychotherapist, one thing I do notice is that inferior and tertiary have like a greater influence than people consciously think. Because, over time I work with people for hours and hours, right? And then when that happens, you get into that world. You could see like the power and the grip of the tertiary inferior. And I think the more you talk with INTJs, the more you realize how much they would be motivated by love. For instance, that's like introverted feeling. So it's like it's there, right? It's very much there. But okay, so tell me the next part of this theory.
Okay. We just went over pragmatic versus affiliative. We did abstract versus concrete, and we did direct versus informative. That's 3 metrics. Another metric is outcome versus progression. This one was very hard for us to wrap our minds around. I even talked to Linda Berens about it. Outcome versus progression or movement. It's like, so outcome / control versus progression / movement. Okay. So an outcome type looks at the end product. Okay. So they talk about the end product of things. It's almost like they romanticize the end product. So like someone like myself, like if I say something, I will say the end product of it. Okay. Someone like Thomas, they see the steps in between to get to the end product. Okay. As in myself, I'm just like, hey, Thomas, we're gonna do this. And he's like, bro, you're not gonna fucking do that. I don't know if I can cuss, but he's gonna.
No, you can. Yes.
Okay.
I want more cursing to bring up that brings up the rating of the show.
But he's like, yo, you're not gonna do that. And I'd be like, but what do you mean? He's like, bro, you gotta understand, you gotta do X, Y, Z, Y, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you get there. And then I'm like, oh man, you just tired me out, like, by giving me the process or the progression to things. So you'll see them talk about like outcomes, like an outcome.
So what makes INTJs more likely to talk about the progression?
Because they just notice the nuances to get something.
Okay.
They just, it's just
the way our brains, like the information travels.
Yeah.
That it causes us to break things down differently, like from TE parent being, in parent spot versus ENTJ or ENTJs that have it in a hero spot. I think they're more maybe goal oriented and look at it towards the end because of that.
Okay. And which types are which?
Okay, so you have the outcome types. Outcome types are ESTJs, ESTPs, ENTJs, and ENFJs. Okay, and the outcome types that are informative are ISFJ, ISFP, INTP, and INFP. Okay, so they're going to be more so looking at the end product and not the progression to get there or the movement to get there. As in, the movement types would be ESFJ, ESFP, ENTP, and ENFP. Okay, and now the direct movement types will be ISTJ, ISTP, INTJ, and INFJ. Okay, and they're gonna, talk about the movement to get to a certain thing. And you'll see it like it's almost like they're on a journey to
exactly.
Do. And when they talk, it flows. This is what I've noticed. It flows like a wave when they're talking. It's like it just flows and flows and flows. But as an outcome person, it's like eek, eek, eek. Because it's just end product. I'm gonna lose weight. I'm a bench 450 pounds. These are just outcomes. Those are just outcomes. Or like this right here will end war hunger. Those are just end products. We're not telling you like the how to, which is more of a progression type. They will go through that. Thomas, you want to talk about anything on that?
I think you guys covered it pretty well. But like maybe some, I don't know if you've seen when we interviewed Dario Nardi, but he's a good example of someone who we asked him a question. He'll go on for like 10 minutes going through the entire the steps A through Z to answer a question. But towards the end, like I think we asked him about whether he's going to be doing brain scans. And he's like, oh, I'm thinking about taking a tour of the US, but then like what Mercer was talking about, see, like Mercer say he would just focus on the end product. Okay, I'm just going to take a tour of the US and do brain scans. But Dario Nardi can't do that because he's INTJ and he's progression focused. So he's like, but in order for me to do this tour of the US, I'd have to do this, I'd have to do this, I'd have to do this, I'd have to do this. And then like that actually kind of, I think, helped me and Mercer understand progression even better, because just the way that our brains are wired, like we see like, okay, we have to do like a million different things in order to accomplish this goal. And then in our case, it could be easy to just get kind of discouraged because like, okay, I have to do like all these different things. And it's just like, that's just way too much work for like very little payback. So just to kind of, maybe that'll kind of like help explain it like in a different way. I think like in terms of just like how our brain is wired, and it's like, it definitely, that interview definitely helped me kind of gain a little bit more self-awareness about like, my approach to things,
A lot of them could procrastinate. They can procrastinate because they
big time.
Like everything they have to do. As in someone who's like myself, it's kind of like a fool. It's kind of like a fool. Even at the end, like, yo, we're gonna do this. Like, there's been times where I'm like, yo, I'm gonna do this, and then Thomas is like, no way, bro. And then I like somehow managed to bring it out there, and he's like, bro, I can't believe it, But it's kind of like to me, it kind of like I've noticed it's kind of like I'm almost a little bit more foolish than them, But a lot of times you can accomplish some of those things by like just looking at the end product. You just keep going. You just don't care. You just take it and just go. As in them, they see all those steps from 1 to 100. I don't see that shit. I don't see it. I just go.
Yeah. Shelly, what's your experience?
Oh, well, I was just gonna say that like TE in the pessimistic spot. I mean, maybe that's similar what you were talking about. With the, I guess, third and fourth function. But anyways, in the pessimistic position for like INFPs, I think you guys struggle with getting things or doing things, getting things done. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe that's like part of it for INTJs with not being as out like or breaking things down. Yeah. I don't know if that has something to do with why that happens or.
Well, that's the thing, like, what INFPs could see. Well, the thing is, we could see a lot of the possibilities. We could fantasize about everything, right? So it's like, so if like any of that could become true, that would be like awesome. But a lot of it does not.
I was just talking about the procrastination.
Leon, do you fantasize about the end product? He's fantasizing all about the end product and not the work to get there.
Sometimes I have a TE side to me.
Yeah, and I'm just saying in general, but I'm just saying like that's your natural proclivity. Just like my natural proclivity is to think about the end product. Like even though I know, like I'm around so many INTJs, like I know, like damn, I got to stop looking it out like the end product. But that's just me, I can't get around it. But like we're saying, like if you figure out these metrics, you're able to like triangulate down on your personality type, because there's 8 types that are outcome and there's 8 types that are progression. Okay, if you're outcome and you're direct, that means you are in charge type. Okay, and that naturally makes you extroverted. Okay, but
like for me, so like for INFPs, how it is that INFPs are the most focused on the process and the qualitative aspect of things in life. I think more so than probably any other type. But secretly there is like an extroverted thinking anxiety. So in the background there's anxiety about like, oh, I'm not like achieving anything. But it's in the background, and the inferior function can kind of become a fixation. So sometimes it's helpful for me to hear from an INTP, because even though like on a day-to-day level I'm more process oriented than even like in INTP. There's something about my psyche where I have anxiety about extra thinking is like, am I achieving the outcomes? And the INTP helps me to understand it's not always about that. It's about like, they kind of inform me of something that's more process oriented. Like,
well, I would say that your personality type isn't as more concerned about competency as an NT. NTs are all about competency and learning. So your personality type, not trying to be mean or anything, isn't more onto that. It's more about purpose and individuality. That's more of the Infps realm. The NT realm is more about competency and learning and mastering things.
right. Well, I'm saying like in terms of like capability in mastering things, but I think like every type has a lot of anxiety about the inferior function. So like when I'm working with clients, there's an inferior function fixation that goes on. If I talk with ISFPs and INFPs, there's always this fixation on the goals and the dreams and achieving them. There's always like this worry about it.
Well, see, what I've noticed between INFPs, my best friends in INFP, and we sometimes get into fights. And when we get into fights, it's more of a TEFI realm. And I will really get into her and say, what the fuck has your morals actually accomplished you? You know, like we will have that debate. I'll say your morals slow you down more than anything. And that's the fight between FI and TE. Because TE, a lot of times to accomplish things, you got to throw away your morals. But he's not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. And it slows you down. So like, we will literally bump heads on that sometimes. And whenever we get mad at each other, we literally will like bump heads. And that's a TFI fight.
Right. So like on a day-to-day basis, INFPs are not focused on TE related stuff. Like how do you just go ahead and achieve the outcome, like find some sort of pragmatic solution? I think like in the background, there's an anxiety around that's almost like obsessive, like kind of if you get into like the unconscious world of all the types, like when you get to the inferior function, like on a day-to-day level, they're not thinking about their inferior, but like at a meta level in the background, it's very much there and haunting them.
I think INFPs are looking at things. One, they're trying to do the right thing. Okay, that's already like
it's a problem. It's getting in the way.
Yes, it's already a problem that's getting in the way. You're trying to do the right thing all the time, because you're more of an affiliative person versus a pragmatic person. And then two, you're worried about your morals, which could be in line with what you want to get done. So that's already two steps holding you back as a, opposed to a person like myself that's like not looking at that. I'm not looking at that. I don't care. It's just food. That's the reason why I kind of get in trouble with my demons. How do I feel? Because I could neglect that for so many years that somehow it like builds a big hole. Neglecting, your FI. Then you figure out like maybe 10, 15 years ago when family members are dead or whatever, and you're like, man, you know what? I probably shouldn't have worked myself so hard and should have spent more time with them.
You want to talk about initiating versus responding? And
all right, we'll go initiate versus responding.
All right. Well, this one is I think pretty simple. I guess we could just start with the responding people. So responding people, they're okay with awkward silence, where the initiating people generally aren't. Mercer and I typed someone yesterday, and we noticed this, that when we weren't talking, that they would have to initiate. But I guess just to get back to what I was saying, though, so me, a responding person, very often they're waiting for someone, like if time isn't an issue, they're waiting for someone else to initiate with them. And then let's say somebody asks me a question, I'll respond directly to that question. And once I'm done answering that question, I'm gonna stop talking. Whereas with the initiating person, like they'll respond to the question and then add additional they'll bring up like additional points or subjects that like wasn't even part of that question. And then sometimes especially when you get like the informative initiating progression kind of people, they could just go nuts where they'll initiate it. You ask them a question and then they'll respond to it, then they'll initiate a point and then they'll respond to the point that they initiated, and then they'll just keep on initiating more points. Like they can go on like forever. Whereas like I was saying, like responding people generally, people that we've typed, you ask them a question, they'll respond directly to the question. regardless of whether they're direct or informative. They'll just answer the question and then they'll stop talking. And then they're okay with the awkward silence. They'll just sit there and wait for another question. So I think that one's pretty simple to understand. If I didn't say it already, so yeah, like the responding person's just going to respond to that question. They're not going to, generally, we're talking about like general tendencies here. I mean, of course, initiating people can come across really responding, and sometimes you see that where they're kind of just waiting for other people to initiate with them, but there are other ways of figuring out whether somebody's initiating or responding based on the other vectors. You don't necessarily, you can have informative people who come across very responding, and then you can have responding people. And you notice this with certain INTJs, I think a lot, is they can come across very extroverted. Like some of them that I guess are more
kind of like Dario Nardi.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's an example. But there's a lot of like performer INTJs, actresses. And they can come across like very bubbly and outgoing to the point where they seem like they're an ESFP, but they're actually not. They're an INTJ. But that's you have to like kind of like read between the lines, and that's where I guess at least in that case where it helps to understand direct versus informative, because even if they're coming across initiating, actually I think Bill Murray's like a good example. He's an INTJ. He comes across very initiating, but ultimately his communications can be very direct. So that's how you have to kind of like triangulate and like, okay, well, this person seems like they're initiating, but they're also progression, they're also direct. So like what at the end of the day, what makes sense here? And then you could kind of like it's deduction. You eliminate types as you go. Whether you're typing, it could be a celebrity or just could be one of the people that we type in our sessions. So
great. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Thomas just hit the nail on that. I would say, like, for instance, a extrovert would more of so they can change the subject. Like I'll just in the middle of you talking or something, I'll change the subject. Or like I will like they can kind of be intrusive too. The extroverts can kind of be a little intrusive. That type of thing.
They interrupt. That's like one of the things I forgot. Whereas like normally I'm responding like I don't like interrupting like I just did. So usually I'll just chill there and wait for people to stop talking before I say something. Whereas the initiating person, I think, is more comfortable just cutting people off and interrupting. That's just like another component to the whole like that dichotomy. So
so you'll see that a lot in their languages. Well, you'll see that a lot in how they talk. Are they responding? Are they initiating? Okay. Are they changing the subject? Are they asking me questions? Like the other day I did Patrick David as a celebrity. He came on someone else's show and he literally took over that man's show. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're so extroverted, you took over his show. But Tom Ballou is an INTJ and Patrick David is an ENTJ. So he comes on his show and then he gets so into it, he wants to figure out Tom more than Tom wants to figure out him. And because Tom is responding, he's just getting overwhelmed until a point where you can see the whole dynamic of the show change. It's like, yo, is Tom on valuetainment or is he on impact theory? So you'll see that a lot with the extroverts.
Well, I'm kind of curious if there's somebody you found really hard to type because perhaps they were like really well developed and balanced.
Well, so you have a lot of vectors. So you're looking at like the pragmatic versus the feeler. If you're looking at the abstract versus the concrete, you're looking at direct versus informative. You're looking at systematic versus interest. You're looking at outcome versus progression. And the thing is what can you easily grab? That's the first thing you want to start with. What can you easily grab with these vectors? Sometimes direct is easy to grab. Sometimes abstract. You get on there and they're just talking about theories and concepts and metaphors and all that. They're just talking about that. You're like, okay, this person's abstract, and now you have just eliminated 8 types. Okay. Now you work from there. You're not just like trying to just go in and just like grab them because you might mess up. You're like, okay, what is the easiest thing that's presenting? What pattern am I seeing? Okay. Now when you see that, okay, I got this. You grab it, you throw it down. Okay. This person's abstract. That's 8 types. So he's either NT or NF because he's abstract. Boom. Okay. Now you go back. You're like, okay, this person's direct. Okay. Oh, okay. Now I just eliminate 4 more types. I'm down to 4 types now that this person is. Then you go back in and you start listening for more, and then you just keep going until it's like elimination, process of elimination, and then you can find someone's type.
Right. Okay, that's pretty cool. So,
We still got
let's see,
systematic.
does that cover all the categories, or are there
No, we
more?
got one more. One more.
Well, can I just say just one thing quickly about that? There are like certain people, like I kind of brought up how certain people who are initiating, but they come across very responding. I think very often you'll see that with ENTPs actually, and I think it's because of their SI inferior, like they're just uncomfortable in new social settings where they'll just kind of like chill and they seem like a introverted person. So I think that's all I wanted to add in addition to that. So it's yeah, I think ENTPs can be some of the most difficult at times for that reason because it's like yeah, and then plus the whole thing they do where they wear masks is like yeah, they can be kind of confusing. Um,
Got it.
ENTPs have FI tricksters, so they tend to not have an identity for themselves. They've kind of like worn masks. I've seen it in my brother. Like I know him personally, but
mhm,
you get around a group and he can pretty much change and feel like become part of that group. You can see the same thing in like somebody like Tupac Shakur. You have a one interview where when he's younger and he's a dancer trying to become an actor, and then the next second, like 5 6 years later, he's talking about killing people.
Hmm.
Where does that line up? It's kind of like what I'm saying. Like that's the FI trickster. So,
Interesting.
but yeah, we got the last one, systematic versus interest. So systematic are people that install systems to get control over their life, and they have a more of a opponent to do that. They're more like into like routines and whatnot. Like every day can be the same for them. As in someone who's interest, they kind of look at other things, like what do they get? Like some interest will be like, what do I get out of a situation? Well, they already always know what they're getting out of a situation. They can be kind of more people focused. As in a
Hmm.
systematic person will install a system. Like, okay, I have a system that I have working out. I have a
So
system.
who's system and who belongs under system?
Okay, so systematics will be the SJs
Hmm.
and the NTs.
Hmm.
So you'll notice like NTs will always have a system. All they behave to a system. Especially like the ENTJs, you always hear them talking about a formula for this or a principle like that they use all the time. You will always hear them talk about it. INTJs as well, like they're very systematic. They, very into their routine. Like for instance, uh pretty much Thomas has been around me. Thomas can literally go out probably like 2 3 weeks, maybe a month, and he can tell you exactly what I'm gonna be doing at exactly what time because I'm so systematic. Like
Hmm.
at the gym at the same time every day. I'm at like that. Like I'm very systematic. Like I'm at the gym at the same time. I go to the bars at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I know you ENTJs. I have a
I
friend, the person who so I met the person who created, if you go into the MTA system, the subway system in New York City, the person who created the countdown system is an ENTJ,
Mhm.
and I'm friends with him. So and he basically runs his life like a subway system.
Yeah. It's
Just
like
like same places. He could just go to a restaurant, just like nod to the person, and they know what food to bring.
yeah, see that'd be indication of being someone who's systematic.
Right.
Like saying like I'm at the bars at the same time. All my friends know to come to my house 9 at 9. Like that's when we're gonna start. Don't show up before that. Like a very systematic, like to the T. Uh, every day is pretty much the same. Or I just have so much more control over my life, and that's ultimately what systematic people are trying to do. That's an
well,
interesting. Go
I
ahead.
just something I'd add to that. I think, well, especially with the NTs, I think it's they think that they could be more productive and more effective being systematic. So especially with Mercer, because he's like systematic on a different level. Like I'm very like repetitive in how I do things, but I think him being like ENTJ, TE hero, like systematic, outcome focused. Yeah, he's got like everything laid out. Like I wish I had things laid out as like well as he does.
Mm.
But I just from my own personal like experience, I think it's I feel like I'm most productive or effective when I have like like a formula or like a set way of doing something, rather than like the interest based person, in one moment they might do something one way, and another moment they might do it another way, just based on like the needs of that moment. I think they're kind of more adaptable in that sense.
Shelley, what's your experience?
So I'm just gonna give you an example of somebody who's interest based in packing for a trip. So my kid's dad, we had to go to Washington. We were going to be there for 3 days, and he just like starts throwing everything that we own in the vehicle. And I'm like, why are you bringing all of these things? That makes no sense. There's going to be so much stuff there. We're not even going to be able to find it once we get there, just because that's, my brain's trying to figure out the method that's going to work and make things go as smoothly as possible. And he's like, well, what if we need something? And I'm like, well, if we miss something, I'll pack. And if we miss something, we'll stop at a store, which that never happens because I know what we need.
I have a question. So like, just a final question here. So which type do you have the hots for?
Me?
Yes, everybody.
Who are you talking to, Leon?
Everybody.
You're too much, man.
Me, it doesn't really come into play as much. If you're talking about just the hots, type doesn't really come into play. It's more of like the person, because they're just hot. You can't really tell. But if you're talking about longevity, like what type of person would you want longevity wise? Like somebody to marry? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're talking about that, I would probably say I would need somebody who's systematic, and I don't like extroverts as much. I want to be the only extrovert really, because I want to. I don't want you to like kind of overburden me with stuff to do. Like I enjoy being the one to come up with the plans. I like to be the one running the show. So if you're extroverted, you're kind of competing with me. I'm not a big fan of that. So I'm more into introverted women. I'm more into systematic women, just because if you throw me off long run, if I'm always like trying to systematize something, you always fucking that up, So I'm gonna also go for someone who is probably a TE user, because we get along more. So most likely for me, I've thought about this a lot. Probably be an INTJ or ISTJ, just for that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, we're gonna go round robin here. Shelley?
Yeah. So I think in life, I've ended up dating a lot of FI hero types, and Thomas had a post about like your child function, maybe like
looks up
recognizing somebody with the hero function and sort of looking up to them for that. And I think maybe that might be part of it. But I guess more into typology, because there were problems such as that car trip with interest type. That particular person was an ISFP. So knowing typology, I think I'm more looking towards the NT types. Just it's easier to talk out issues with them, I'm finding.
Got it. Thomas?
Alrighty. Well, so I guess it really depends, like what the perspective is here. Like, are we just talking about physical attraction? Or are we talking about like something else? Like, I think
I'll be interested in both.
I think there is truth to visual typing, and I'm not, I haven't made sense of it all yet.
Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome. You're part of my team.
Yeah, I think that for some reason, and if certain types are generally just more attractive, like and it also depends on gender. But I think generally, like the women that are most attractive in terms of type, what I notice that a lot of them are like I guess what is that I can't remember the quadrant names, but whatever, like the ISFPs, ESFPs, INTJs. I think they're physically among the most attractive. I also like physically. I like I guess that's beta quadra, like the ISTPs, ENFJs, INFJs. I think they can be very attractive. Also, I guess the honorable mention is ESFJs. In terms of personality, probably I like ESFJs a lot. I think I would probably want someone
that's pretty hot with all the cognitive functions being very different.
Yeah. Well, I think I would want somebody who is like more affiliative and loyal and like about doing the right thing. So but I understand where Mercer's coming from, saying that he likes he prefers introverts. I'd say overall, I think I would prefer an introvert, but I think as far as extroverts go, ESFJ would probably be like in some ways like a more chill extrovert, where I've known like quite a few ESFJs. They're about doing their duty, and very often they're just kind of home buddies. They're not like the ESFP who's gonna go out there and be a party animal, I can't, not that I dislike ESFPs, but I really can't deal with them for like a long period of time because they'll just burn me out. And I don't remember exactly what your view is on compatibility, but I don't think generally that you have good compatibility with people you share the same functions with. I think you could share maybe two of the functions, but I don't think you want to share all your functions. But I realize that relationships and all that is very complicated, and you do see cases where people like Donald Trump and his first wife Ivana, how they she's ISFP, he's ENTJ, how they shared the same functions, and they made it work for a period there. But I think generally that someone from like my own quadro would probably wouldn't meet my needs very well. I wouldn't meet their needs very well. And I think we'd probably just end up hating each other. So, with me, I guess my concern is I'm afraid of getting bored of people. So I don't know if you know the philosopher Nietzsche, but at one point he wrote something like the most important thing is that you're able to actually hold a conversation with this person, down the road. You could still hold a conversation from day to day. And you need to find someone that you can actually do that with, and that you're not bored of them.
That's interesting because it's kind of like a universal truth, but at the same time, it's like a very INTJ truth too.
What he said?
Yeah,
about
that's like
right about that.
Intellectual conversation, basically having like a mind mate.
And that's important too, because if I don't respect like your intellect. If I don't think you're smart, or you're just, you can't keep up with me, I'm probably just gonna like kind of stupid zone you, and I'm just gonna be bored and not want to talk to you about like the mundane, like day to day, like small talk kind of things.
Joyce Meng had a really interesting insight about that. So she told me about that's the difference between NTJs and NTPs. So NTJs would stupid zone you if they decide that you're stupid, right? Then you become categorically stupid. Whereas like an INTP or ENTP, they might decide like in the moment that you're stupid, but they're just gonna hear you just in case you might say something smart.
I think INTPs might get stupid zoned themselves because they tend to be space cadets, and people like my son gets treated like he's dumb just because he has that sort of nature about him. I think being informative with they can, go off on tangents, and people can just think they don't know what they're talking about.
That's true. Well, INTPs they're smart, but sometimes they could come off as dumb if they're, sometimes their way of figuring things out is like very slow.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
TI is slow. As in TEs is a lot faster because TEs just like grabbing stuff. As in TI has to logically go through and think it through and apply it to a logical framework that they've already had. That takes quite a bit of time. You can just, sounds true, accept it, move on.
Because I have go ahead, Shelley.
I said you didn't answer the question yourself there.
Oh yeah, that's part of my nature though. I collect information and I don't share things about myself.
Well, at one point he was dating an ENFJ. He was trying to date ENFJ, right, Leon? You're going for the ENFJ?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I remember, man.
Right.
But yeah, so those are our metrics. We use pragmatic versus affiliative, abstract versus concrete, direct versus informative, systematic versus interest, outcome versus progression. These are all of Linda Berens metrics that she got from David Kersey. He was her teacher, and we also combine that with cognitive functions. So we'll see how you're talking, what cognitive functions you're using, and that will help us narrow it down. And we have a channel. It's called Mongolian Type with Mongolian Mindset. We are doing free typing sessions for a limited time. I think just on the group alone, we've had 17 typing sessions that are on the YouTube. So you can check it out and see how we do. We practically just ask you questions. You answer the questions, and at the end, me, Thomas, and Shelly triangulate. Sometimes Thomas is not there, and if he's not there, then he usually goes back and he reviews the film, and he leaves comments to what functions he's seeing, what statements he's seeing that are pragmatic, affiliative, direct, informative. So we do a pretty good job of typing.
Right.
So.
Right. This has been a really enriching conversation. And so I thank all of you for being on this show.
Thanks for having us, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Leon.